right, so I'm Travis Howerton. As you mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO at RegScale. For the first couple of years of our existence, I was a CTO, so I was more on the technical side. By way of background, I spent the first 20 years of my life in national security, starting the federal side, where when I retired, I was the first chief technology officer of the U.S. nuclear weapons program, where I got to experience firsthand the pain of being on the receiving end of reading and reviewing ATO packages. Then I got to go to Oak Ridge National Lab, where I was in a CIO type role, where I got to build the ATOs and get audited, which was significantly less fun. And now on the RegScale side, we're helping people with automating everything that has to do with risk and compliance, based off 20 years of being frustrated with everything about how all of that worked. And so by way of background, I'm one of the founders. My fellow founder is Anil Carmel, who many of you may have met or know. We were just kind of looking at this problem in the 2015 timeframe and looking, and everything about this process just kind of sucks. You generate paper no one wants to read, no one wants to write, all to try to get a feeling of where you're at on risk. And we were looking at it going, it's really bad today, but if you look at the trends, it's going to move from bad to impossible or idiotic, somewhere in that neighborhood, because it's not sustainable. And there's a couple reasons for this thesis for myself. First is cloud is going to be everywhere in 2030 and not necessarily in the same version of cloud you're experiencing today. Meaning all new systems are pretty much being built to be ephemeral. They're cloud native, they scale up, they scale down. I came up in cyber where you would draw a boundary around something, you would look at your assets, you would lock them down, and you would harden everything to get your ATO. How do you do that when there is no boundary, everything's moving, and things stand up and down on demand? It makes no sense. So it's just fundamentally broken in that way. We do all sorts of things to try to work our way around it, but foundationally, it just wasn't designed for that world. The second problem we saw coming is what I'll call the cyber Oprah effect, which is where you get a framework, and you get a framework, and you get a framework, and you get a framework. And if you look at the Venn diagram, there's a lot of redundancy, and I think the gentleman earlier mentioned about unfunded mandates. You just keep getting hammered with more and more and more controls you have to implement with the same number of people. Like, none of these come with more people to go do the work, typically. So you've got a moving target on top of growing uncontrolled scope. And just for fun, I'm a big fan of Thomas Friedman's book, The Age of Accelerations. And sort of his thesis is that Moore's law is moving exponentially, and humans don't work well in exponentials. And so they underestimate how fast things get worse and how fast things are going to change. And I think that's the problem you're going to have here, is everything's going to change so much faster than we all think it's going to. I came up in computer science where we were thinking about like the Turing test. And can you talk to someone on a phone on the other end and not know it's a computer? And that was sci-fi. We blew right past that with ChatGPT and AI. Like, it wasn't even there. Like, that was the standard my whole life, and now it's just gone. Now we're talking about super intelligence and other things. So this is going to move faster. So you've got this situation where it's not great today. Everybody's got a backlog of work they can't do. It's going to be worse because it's a moving target with a growing set of scope. It's going to be 4 to 8 to 12 times faster than what we have to do today. And nobody's positioned for success. Just nobody's. I don't care which organization you talk to in government. It's just not sustainable the way we've done it. And so we just kind of had our Seinfeld moment. And so I'll date myself. That's my favorite show. And so if everything about this is stupid, then the opposite might be good. So we just went anti-George and just said, if all of this is bad, then maybe the opposite could be good. And so we looked at, well, what might 2030 look like in a winning environment? Well, AI would do a lot of this work. And we're not out here saying AI is going to replace all of you. What we're saying is you probably need 12 people to do the work, and you've got 3 funded. So how do we make those 3 people act like they're 12 and supercharge them using AI? Just pull a lot of the manual, monotonous work out of things. And then this idea of self-updating paperwork. Nobody writes it, so let's just stop doing it. Machines should attest to their own state. We live in an API economy. There's no reason that can't happen. AWS has been big on pushing OCSF, other standards for exchanging data. Also, the NIST OSCAL teams here, looking at the ATO as code. The paperwork should just update itself in a machine-readable format that embraces modern DevOps, right? And APIs should just allow that to happen. We should also look at how we get our arms around the control ecosystem. It's unsustainable to just keep adding controls for everything. So you've got the regulatory side, which is the Oprah effect. But then the other two sides of this we don't talk about as much, at least not in the government world, which is you have operational controls. What does it take to run your business? There's a whole universe of controls and SLAs you need to manage. There's probably some overlap on that Venn diagram with the regulatory side. And then you've got threat-based controls. What are bad guys actually going to do to you? Because they don't care about what illustrates. They're going to attack the way that they attack. That's going to expose you to risk, and you need controls in place to mitigate that. So basically, you want to consolidate controls. And then what we've looked at on the RegScale side, and what we encourage people to think through, regardless of what tool stack you use, is I mentioned I'm a nuclear weapons guy. So I came from a manufacturing world, and so I was born and raised in the religion of Toyota production system. And so I just think of everything as Lean Six Sigma. Every control has the same life cycle. You have to attest to it, say what you're going to do. Nobody believes you in this world, so you got to collect evidence to prove it. You then got to bring in an auditor, somebody to look at it and say, is it good or not? You're going to break things, so you'll have issues and POAMs to fix. All along the way, you're making risk-based decisions about what you will or won't do, and then you've got to govern all that for traceability to get through all the government audit stuff. We think if you look at AI and automation, you should be looking at everywhere there's stupid in every phase of that controls lifecycle and yanking it out, regardless of how you do it. In embracing DevOps, bringing the principles of DevOps to compliance. Compliance is code, APIs, and so that's our thesis about where things are going and sort of the train wreck that's heading towards everybody, and a framework for how you might think about approaching the problem. With that, I'll hand it over and share some other perspectives on the panel.
All right. Hello, I am Lloyd Evans. I appreciate you, Charles. And very, very aligned from our conversations that we've had, kind of leading up to this in terms of our thoughts of the future. So yeah, I'm Lloyd Evans. I'm the Vice President of Governance Risk Compliance here at Aquia. I came up through the Air Force in my career, and I have spent time at a software factory inside the Air Force, some time as a principal ISO for a platform as a service, doing things like control inheritance to applications, kind of that like middle tier of abstraction between the cloud service providers and application delivery organizations. And currently I'm now the security lead for that platform, as well as the VP of GRC. So I figured a good narrative to go through this is in 2030 we may be in Rep 6 of NIST 853. We will see. So maybe there's some things like data protection as it comes into AI. Maybe there's some additional controls. I think I kind of view AI more of tooling that exists across our current architecture. So maybe there will be a new control family that deals with it. Maybe there won't. Either way, there will still likely be some of the heavy lifts as far as manual controls. And so I've split kind of the NIST 853 control family framework here into about 3 sections and have some safe takes, some spicy takes. None of them are super spicy. So hopefully you have some questions that can get into that. But as far as the manual controls, I think the safe take here, most of it will be very quickly automated kind of as we move forward to the future. Now, the slightly spicier take is like what that means for a GRC professional. And I think what that means is that the actual compliance knowledge will be increasingly commoditized, and the skills will become more towards how you can pair your compliance framework, the knowledge, the people that support, kind of the 3 folks that you're able to have funded, how they can compare the compliance framework either one to the actual business, the business context, and this means like very, very closely working with, kind of like your marketing teams, your go-to-market plan, your strategies that are going to actually be happening as a part of, say your FedRAMP journey, your customer marketplace that you're going to be entered into. Your GRC professionals are going to need to be very tied into that, or tied into the actual technology piece. And this is where the kind of compliance commoditization comes into place, where, right now we can, you can kind of go home today and spin up a templated, kind of like generic incident response plan. Some of the teams that we've been working on, we've been doing some automated document generation along these fronts. But where the real value comes in for a GRC professional here in 2030 is being able to contextualize that to your environment. And that's going to be, we're going to increasingly for the manual controls see the actual work really filtered down to that contextual analysis for your business. And there's going to be a lot fewer opportunity in the space of kind of, the manual lift that we currently enjoy. And I think this kind of illustrates my point. I think we'll see some things, currently in AI that you can see generated that you're like, all right, that's fine, it generated that quick. I don't know what I can do with it. Same thing, with the interpretation piece. I think one thing that AI or GRC just as a whole requires is precision, and that's not something that AI tools do very well at the moment. So for folks looking to develop capabilities within using LLMs in kind of the AI space, especially in the policy generation as well as the assessment, the finding the precision and the language that can appropriately address the control is going to be the huge, I think, secret sauce that evolves there for tools that GI professionals use, or GRC professionals use. All right, so for kind of the middle tier, there's things that we inherit from cloud service providers. And my safe take is that fortunately, I think, capabilities will be increasingly abstracted. I think my spicy take is that maybe unfortunately, capabilities will be increasingly abstracted. I think that that's, a pretty safe prediction for the future. So hopefully we can see more good things coming out of our service providers. Now, here's where the meat, I think of the future kind of comes down to, which is the shared responsibility controls. So, a lot of these we have manual control generation, whether you are using, security tools like Security Hub, CI/CD pipelines, your security tooling baked into those pipelines, things that kind of have shared responsibility, especially like vulnerability management kind of comes into place where you might have a platform that provides the maintenance for your vulnerability tools within your pipeline. You have your application teams which are mediating those findings, and you have the, all of that built on top of your cloud service provider. I think this remains shared. Now, as the tools grow that we use together and mature, I think that this will be increasingly kind of going to that like business context. Vulnerability management's a great use case here. Your GRC professional might be more involved in the actual like findings themselves, tying that automatically to your kind of POAMs, maybe using a future GRC tool to be doing things as part of that. And as far as tooling goes here, this is kind of that technical piece that I was teeing up earlier. For a GRC professional, the ability to actually get into the data of your system, be able to use tooling systems and the actual engineering skills to tie that to your compliance framework will be really, really key. Won't just be, hey, let's use your compliance knowledge to write some control statements, and that's good enough. It'll be really getting that evidence layer, kind of as Travis mentioned earlier, of pulling things from your system and tying that to your ATO. And so overarching, I think the pattern right now, most GRC teams are kind of siloed, if not by organizational design, kind of by knowledge. And I very much see success in the future being GRC becoming more of an engineering discipline alongside your things like application security, security engineering. I think there's kind of maybe two disappointments to pull apart here in this prediction. The first disappointment is maybe for GRC folks, especially some of the ones that have been like really baked in compliance for a long time. I think that one of the disappointments is you will the opportunities moving forward will be more and more limited to pure GRC knowledge. You'll need to pair that with either kind of that business acumen or the technical knowledge, as I mentioned earlier. And then Disappointment number 2 is for technical folks on the other end. I very much don't see GRC compliance frameworks, all of the kind of going through 700 line item controls. That's very much here to stay. I would say I don't think that that'll be going away anytime soon. So if you're looking to, kind of automate things, build tooling, there's really no way around doing like the really hard and somewhat boring work of, tying like, hey, we have this new capability, we need to tie it to 700 controls. That's laborious work. I'm sure all of us have kind of been in the weeds in there at one point. For kind of your technical folks that want to like abstract this and make that go away, I think that there is, some level of acceptance there as far as like doing the hard work for those mappings. But between those two disappointments, I think there's immense opportunity for people who are able to kind of, see that landscape for what it is and look for, ways to, kind of go through all the manual GRC work, tie that to the systems that we actually have, whether those are AI enabled or not, and then be able to move forward there. I think there's immense opportunity in this space for anyone that's willing to kind of pick up both those skills. And an example of this, kind of going into the present, I think this was a great use case that one of the teams that I've worked on kind of put together, and that was using Audit Manager. So we were able to get a custom deployment of some infrastructure with a config conformance pack, using that alongside Audit Manager to gather evidence for 184 out of roughly 780 control elements. And that really ties to that evidence piece. So when you're going through an assessment, especially through something like, FedRAMP, whether there's time to market on the table, very rational reasons for trying to speed up this process. For an assessment that where you have like currently manually looking through evidence, like, hey, there's this control statement that's written, let's look into the system. It's much, much easier if you already have those, config checks in place. So if you're saying that you're using AWS CloudWatch and CloudTrail for your auditing, config, you can run it through an Audit Manager assessment, see that those are enabled for all the accounts that are in scope, and you just have the data that's immediately there. And then that kind of shifts the GRC person from, kind of going through, a bunch of different accounts, maybe using the CLI or UI to try and dig for data, to just reviewing, all right, these checks are green, there's one here that's red, let's use our time here that's very valuable to talk about this and kind of move forward in that lens. I very much see assessments as well as evidence generation of the future moving more towards this model. And with that, I will key it up to Dave. Thank you.
So thanks everyone. My name is Dave Pannu. I'm a solution architect at AWS working on federal partners. So Travis Boyd kind of spoke about the future of GRC. So I'll be covering what AWS has right now in order to help modernize GRC functions. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with this already, but those of you who aren't, this is a shared responsibility model. And with this, AWS is responsible for security of the cloud. So this entails things such as source level operating systems, the virtualization layer, down to the physical security of the data centers. So customers are responsible for security in the cloud. So this means things such as data in the cloud that you put, as well as network and firewall protections, and identity and access management. So the easiest way to set up and govern at scale is AWS Control Tower. So really what this is a managed service version of a multi-account structure. So it provides you a deployment of best practice blueprints for your guardrails. So with Control Tower, there's over 500 controls that are already built in. From there, you can also automate the provision of new workload accounts, dev accounts with guardrails built around those as well. So you can take advantage of things like service control policies to limit what a user can and cannot do within that environment, as well as deploy with infrastructure as code or via CloudFormation or Terraform in order to pre-deploy a set of resources in there that a user might need. And then there's a dashboard at the end that's available that also gives you an idea of what your compliance looks like within the accounts. So, as I mentioned, what Control Tower does is it stands up a landing zone for you. So this is a well-architected multi-account deployment with a baseline that starts off with your management account, a log archive account, and then an audit account. From there, you establish the controls, as I mentioned, the 500 plus controls that are built into Control Tower, as well as additional service control policies that you can apply in order to limit what can and cannot be done within that environment. And then you can automate the account provisioning. So users can, as you stand up accounts via Account Factory, there's a baseline infrastructure already in there. And then finally, it also stands up a centralized identity and access management. So it uses AWS IAM Identity Center in order to consolidate where users are logging in from, as well as logging from that infrastructure. And then it continuously manages this for you, and if there's any drift detected, they'll alert you to that. So AWS Config allows you to continuously assess, audit, and evaluate resources within your environment to determine if they're meeting your compliance requirements. So Config is a native agentless AWS service that discovers AWS resources within your account. And then from there, you can track configuration changes. So things like, maybe an SSH port was opened up, but it shouldn't be. Config will alert you to that, and then you can remediate that, whether taking action via, just alerting the member who did it, or having, taking advantage of a service to like FedRAMP to automate that and triggering a Lambda function to change that back to, internal access only. Yeah, it evaluates, and these configuration changes can be, stored for 7 years. So when it comes to, audit readiness, you have these logs available for up to 7 years. And then, when it comes to large amounts of policy that you might need to meet, there's also config conformance packs. So conformance packs are designed for certain compliance standards that allow you to quickly and easily enable config rules. And then for risk management, as you can see here, we have a broad and depth, a breadth and depth of services. So this is identity and access management, detective controls, infrastructure protection, data protection, as well as incident response. So one of the things I kind of want to use to build the story here is I talked about IAM Identity Center in order to log into your infrastructure, right? To consolidate that logging in across the house. So last year we released TEAM, or Temporary Elevated Access Management. So what this allows you to do is actually have just-in-time access for certain accounts. So maybe in your production account, you want to have just-in-time access. If an administrator wants to log in, you need a two-person authentication, they have to provide a reason, and it tracks what they're doing within that infrastructure. So this kind of removes that risk associated with human interaction, but it doesn't increase the operational burden. And then we'll kind of continue on with this as we go through some more services and how that story all ties together. So next is AWS Security Hub. So Security Hub is a cloud security posture management service. So it provides AWS best practice checks and alerts you to misconfigurations, as well as provides you with a single pane of glass to understand what's going on within your environment, as well as provide a single findings format, ASFF, or Amazon Security Findings Format. So some of the services they can take in are, a layer, kind of build our layered security approach. So we have services like Guard Duty that continuously monitor your account for malicious activity. We have services such as Amazon Inspector that can be used to scan for known vulnerabilities within EC2 instances, Lambda functions, and containers. There's Amazon Macy that can be used to scan S3 for PII data, as well as partner solutions. All this data can be fed into Security Hub. Security Hub can then trigger event-based rules, allowing you to automatically remediate any of the potential issues. So, this could be whether you notify a member of your security team with the SNS notification, a text message, or an email, automatically fix issue by triggering a Lambda function, as well as store any alerts into an S3 bucket for long-term archival purposes. So CloudTrail is a service that enables you to log any actions that users are taking against AWS resources. So any API calls that are made via SDKs, the CLI or the console can be logged within CloudTrail, and then you can utilize these for audit purposes. And one of the features that we actually released with CloudTrail, I think on GovCloud side last year is CloudTrail Lake. So this is a turnkey solution that allows you to store logs for up to 7 to 10 years. These are immutable. So what that allows you to do really, as well as you can query this with standard SQL. So what this allows you to do is, for example, I mentioned earlier where an administrator might have to log in with just-in-time access to a workload account. You can use CloudTrail Lake and actually push instance logs to it as well. So, for example, this gives you a reason, you can then track what the user did within a certain instance if something happened in there, and then push those to an immutable data store that you can then reference back for audits. And then AWS Audit Manager. So AWS Audit Manager allows you to, as Lloyd mentioned, generate audit-ready reports. So this allows you to select pre-built frameworks for audits. So there's FedRAMP, CIS, HIPAA, SOC 2, and then, or you can also build your own custom frameworks. When you activate it, you select what's in your compliance boundary, the accounts and the regions and the resources, and then from there, it will automatically ingest information from services that I just mentioned. So services like security, services like config, as well as service-to-service API calls, and you can also, put in data from emails and any PDFs. So kind of like I mentioned earlier with the workflow, you have an administrator logging into an account, he's doing some work on it, you can push that all into CloudTrail Lake, you can then ingest that into Audit Manager for your compliance, and then you can have an email chain that like, hey, why did you log in, what happened, like what was the result, and then you have an audit-ready report with all the links back to the evidence when the time comes. And then AWS Artifact, this is the final service, and this is really a no-cost service that allows you to get compliance reports from AWS as well as any third-party ISVs that are selling products within the marketplace. And there's a great reInvent talk that happened in December that covers a lot of what's new with their GRC services. So if anyone's interested, you can just search for it. So in 2023, we released over 3,400 services. And 90% of what we build is based on customer demand. So of those new 3,300 or 3,400 services and feature updates, that means over 3,000 of them were based on what you, the customer, need, right? So if there is a need for something in a service that you want to see a feature, reach out to your account teams so we can make sure that we either submit a product feature request on your behalf, potentially bring in a service team, or we might know a partner that already has a solution built on top of AWS that we can introduce you to. And one of the new things that just came out last week is ML Space. So that's a GitHub repository that adds a new governance layer wrapper around SageMaker. So it allows you to, it allows data scientists to access an AWS console-like UI, but not the actual AWS console. So you can then, add data protection. They can only access data for the project that they're assigned to. They can share data within that project to other members on that project, as well as then limit things like what sort of instance classes they might be able to access in order to help have those controls.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Travis. Are there any questions?
Yeah, a question for AWS. The customer compliance guides released last week or the week before. What's the rationale for how they're released? Like a Acrobat PDF with an embedded Excel spreadsheet?
I don't know why they had that rationale, but the CCGs are now available on their standard compliance website. You no longer have to even go into the console to access those. I guess just because there's a lot there, it just simplifies it, putting it into a PDF and having all the files in one. But yes, I know, like, the first time I asked it, I'm like, how do I get to this? I found a little paperclip icon.
Wait, by the way, Travis, I love the Seinfeld reference, by the way. Love to catch up at happy hour. Lloyd, you mentioned that you found that automated security mapping is like kind of like there's going to be some manual processing, maybe heavily manual processing. Could you delve a little bit more into like why you think, as an engineer, I think, man, I hear that and I go, there's got to be an opportunity. But I'd love to hear something like from there.
Yeah, I think the opportunity is sifting through and finding kind of what's I guess like I'm going to use the word commodity, but like what are similarities between like generating documentation as well as assessing it across all of the manual controls, and then the once those are kind of defined for whatever the tooling that you're looking or trying to engineer, then it's finding like the things that you can't automate are the business context, and that's kind of what I was kind of referring to with like not aiming for 100% automation. And I think an incident response plan is like a really good example of this, where you can automatically generate an incident response plan, but something that's actually going to be used in the event of an incident is something that I don't fully think can be like automated at the moment. Like if you can do that, it's amazing. I think that would be a very, very tough challenge though, where, kind of as you're going through, even just stakeholder identification, like tracking down all of the, stakeholders who need to be pulled into an incident, working within Centers for Medicaid and Medicare, many of us within the federal ecosystem, most of that is like tribal knowledge, depending on, all of the different kind of, players who might be involved. And then once you start delving into, your federal kind of points of contact, your supporting contractors, teams change all the time, context changes, keeping up all of those types of things. Yes, tools like a more modern GRC system of record, kind of things that we can leverage from a service provider, custom tooling that we build, all of that can support and take the manual toil from building something like an incident response plan. We can have like playbooks, run books, things that have like auto remediation, all those things are available to us, but the centralized point of, keeping that context up to date, making sure that the right conversations are being had. If you have, kind of something that we've dealt with is like, you have two different places you're required to send your logs to, and then, those might be on different contract vehicles. There might be like, overlying, political involvements and all of that. Like all of that requires a human, but that also requires a human that one has the technical ability to be able to string solutions together, with kind of the compliance knowledge. I kind of call it, the compliance stomach, to like go through all of those controls and make sure that, like the incident response family alone has like over 20 controls in it, all with like very specific, detailed language, making sure that's all answered for at certain places of your incident response plan. You can have, maybe an AI tool at some point that, validates that, but even then on the assessor front, you're going to need someone who can go through and be like, wait, like, how does this incident response plan work? Because we can generate one that'll pass an assessment, but the difference in kind of the opportunity is like, you can already kind of create paperwork that just gets made for an assessment and then gets shelved somewhere, siloed somewhere else. I think as GRC, the AI kind of conversation aside, we really want to move more towards something that's valuable to the business. So hopefully I answered your question there.
No, we're saying good to know humans are still needed in some aspects. So.
Yeah, I very much think so. Yeah.
And maybe I can add just an additional spin on that I think is important. Like everybody looks at where AI is going and they see all this stuff and they go like, this is going to eliminate my job, and they freak out. Like, we're going to automate everything, and then tool vendors make it worse because we come in like, we're going to automate all your stuff. And as a former exec who would buy that sort of stuff, like my initial thought as soon as I meet that person is lies. Like it's just lie. You're not going to. Like, so if you look at the NIST family, 30% of those are technical controls and 70% are administrative type stuff. They're not good candidates for automating like with an AWS or any of those things. They're just not. They require humans to do things, which is why I think AI has a chance to supercharge humans, right? Because I think right now the industry has a problem of 80% of the human time is spent writing crap nobody wants to read and doing data calls to prepare for audits that never end, right? Only 20% of their time is spent on the value, which is looking at all the data and saying, where's the risk, what's the right thing for the business and the organization, and how do we move forward smartly? So I think the opportunity is not to get rid of the humans, is to make them spend 80% of their time doing that. Get rid of the 20% of the time, all the other time it sucks, right? And make those 3 to 4 humans operate like 12 to 15 humans do today. So you don't wait 2-3 years to get an ATO, right? And sit in a backlog queue. This stuff can just move. I think that's the opportunity for the industry. It's not to get rid of the people, it's to make the people more effective.
Yeah, I'd add on to that too. I checked this morning. So I really like coffee. And back in the day, I used to work at a Starbucks. Starbucks, you can have 3 people at the center of an incredible system that can they can make over 20,000 drinks. Go through hundreds of customers in a day. And I checked this morning, and the market cap of Starbucks is 103 billion, whereas a fully automated coffee machine is a novelty at an airport. I don't even know what company makes that machine. It's fully automated. You can go there and you can press the screen and you can get your robotic coffee right after. I don't know what company makes that. So, there's some hope there maybe. Any other questions?
I was going to suggest,
It's on.
I was going to suggest that part of the problem is that you're not thinking out of the box here. It seems to me that you're thinking still in silos. And that if I look at it and I say 2030, I might not be around at that point. The issue is that one can move by looking at the architecture of the solution. And that I believe that interconnection platforms as a service is the way to go, because you're only having to manage the delta for each thing. If you've got everything inside of a single authorization boundary, or silos is a great big thing here, and silos is a big thing there, how are you ever going to manage this from anyone really knowing what you're actually doing? And the answer to me is to step back and to look at the diagram of the way you're actually architecting your solution and managing it from the business model and going forward. Because, it's interesting that you rewriting for the cloud entirely one's application is a good exercise. And if you do that, you save a huge amount later, because you've thought about these things as you move, rather than trying to add them all at the end when you're trying to go for compliance. And my suggestion is that we truly think that that's not the way to go, that you can build digital platform. If you're trying to do this as software as a service, it's going to be very difficult. But if you're building digital twins of the environment, and then you can move on from there, you can take advantage of those things that you're talking about on the screen right there, and you can build solutions that do the job and put them together so that they're compliant as they go, rather than trying to say, okay, now I've got this big behemoth, what am I going to do now and make it compliant? Seems to me not a great way of solving the problem. But then, I'm not a new tech person. I'm an old tech person.
Yeah, I very much empathize, and I think that there's, I think some of the challenge there is the interpretation piece, both from kind of a as we're talking about FedRAMP from an assessment standpoint, where you have 3 PAOs, kind of like a whole ecosystem. We were chatting with a few folks this morning about how, even for NIST 853, do you interpret that for the full stack? Do you interpret, yes, you may do, vulnerability scanning for your application, but do you do it for infrastructure, vice versa? It depends on who you adopt to. And I don't think everyone has the exact same interpretation. I know they don't. And so I think that kind of we were talking about thinking outside the box. I think that there's a great opportunity there, kind of like as we've talked, to create the services that you're talking about that break down those silos. But at the same time, I think that there's a kind of going back to the successful compliance person in 2030 understands the business component, because you very much, even having that service, just the technology piece isn't alone. You have to be able to sell it and be able to, you know, kind of breach the market and kind of win people over on your side.
And I would say, like, the right solution depends on where you're starting from. And so, like, if you're a startup like RegScale, like, you're going to build all cloud native, and you've got a much more limited problem set you're dealing with than a 70-year-old nuclear program that had thousands of applications across 30 different, like, their ability to be out of the box is extremely limited. And so I think the right solution just depends on where you're starting, your requirements, but the thing we encourage is everybody needs to look at the problem and figure out how they move forward, because where we're at sucks. And the right solution for you is going to vary depending on where you're starting from, what you're trying to solve, the money you have, the mandate, the technical debt you bring to the party. But there's a lot of innovation from different folks that are here and out in the community trying to solve this problem that I think everybody needs to be looking at how you move forward and do something different, because what we've been doing isn't going to work.